Hi, I'm Tina Cummins,
I'm Belinda Powers. We are
True Crime SAGES. Welcome back, everybody. Tonight, we're going to be discussing a lot of information. There's been a lot of information that's come out about Kegan Kline and the Murder Sheet podcast that they did on YouTube for the transcripts that were accidentally released by the clerk's office. There's a lot to cover tonight, Belinda, so this is going to be a long one. You ready for this?
talk on them.
All right. So Belinda and I were talking about in our last video about how I believe in particular that Kegan Kline checks every box as far as what a serial predator / killer would be. Let me preface all of this by saying all persons discussed are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Okay, so in looking at a serial killer, back in the beginning, first week, we believed it was a serial killer that took Abby and Libby. And there are many reasons why we believe that. So let's talk a little bit. You ready to talk about some behaviors? Let our viewers know what we're thinking in terms of the behaviors of this person in particular. So there's different types of serial killers. One is organized, one is mixed, and one is disorganized. A disorganized serial killer, for example, they're more spur of the moment. And so when they go to take somebody, it's compulsive and they're not really prepared. They might leave a lot of evidence at the scene. The scene's usually a mess. And then there's a mixed type where they do have some things where they're kind of prepared. And then you have the organized serial killer. Now, an organized serial killer, they're more apt to stalk. They're more apt to be prepared with a kill kit. They tend to pick a location in advance. When we first started talking about this, like I said, people really came down on me hard. It's not a serial killer. It's not a serial killer. How can you say that? You're crazy. Well, in looking at the way Bridge Guy comes across the bridge, everybody's seen the tape a million times by now, to exaggerate, but it's been out there for 5 years and everybody's seen the tape. But it's clear now that he had a weapon on him. It's clear that he was prepared to take 2 girls in the middle of the day. And I don't believe it was his first time. Okay. For someone who's never committed murder before, they're not going to take so much risk unless they're willing to off themselves in that moment. They're not going to take so much risk and go out in the middle of the day in a public place and take 2 girls at once. They might take one. What do you think, Belinda?
Well, and to take time with signaturing, the crime scene too.
Yeah.
I think that speaks a lot for that.
Now, early on, we said this was by happenstance, but it was premeditated. What does that mean? Okay, so what that means is they didn't know that Abby and Libby were going to be off school that day. Now,
Right.
Incidentally, Kegan made contact with Liberty German. You said that morning. That means he would have had, if it was 8 in the morning, he would have had maybe 3 hours to prepare or 2 hours to prepare. So it's definitely premeditated. By happenstance, how many people did he invite out there, and were they gonna show? Now, the police in the transcripts, they said, well, did you tell anybody the information? No. Well, then who else was with him? Who else was it? We'll touch more on that later, but he didn't know if they were going to show or not. But I think everybody at this point has seen the Instagram that was released that, you know, he was asking Libby to meet him, and she said, well, why am I going to go meet you? You could rape us. And he said, well, I could kill you. I think it's been in the public for a long time. Most people have seen it. So he didn't know these girls were going to be off school. He had contact with them that morning. The killer that took Abby and Libby was prepared to go out there middle of the day, take two girls, do whatever he wanted with them, and get out without being detected. Had to know where the Delphi Bridge was, had to know the trails. What am I missing here? Am I missing anything on that note, on that point? Okay, so moving on. Kegan had made contact with Libby, and he had groomed her for a long period of time. It was months. The police discussed it, you know, in the transcripts. They were questioning him. Now, I think Belinda and I've said many times, for us, he checks every box, and we're going to go over some of those points. So 90 to 95% of serial predators, serial killers, they spend their waking hours fantasizing. Now let's look at Kegan for a minute. He makes up these fake instances of, oh, he's living in Vegas for a couple of years when actually he's only there for a few days. He's got this great band and he's been on the road, and he's got all this money, and, you know, he's Anthony Schatz or he's Emily Ann, and, you know, he's got all kinds of cash, and he's got fake accounts, and, you know, he's using fake accounts to procure images from little girls, because frankly, if they saw him for who he really is, they're not gonna, they'd be like, hell no, I'm not gonna,
Right.
not
Yeah,
attractive at all. You know, they're not gonna waste their time with him. And so, you know, he's living out these fantasies. With a lot of serial killers, they make their fantasies become their realities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their whole goal. And it's completely self-serving and narcissistic. Is there anything you want to add to that, Belinda?
No. You look at it, this all goes back to his childhood. It all goes back to all learned behaviors. He got it from somewhere.
Well, and in listening to his siblings, you know,
Mm-hmm.
his own sister wanted to meet him in Vegas, and he didn't show up. He says, yeah, I'm living out here. She lived not far from there. She's like, I want to meet you. And he ghosted her. He just didn't show. So after that, she's like, you know, well, you can't. And then she found out he wasn't even living in Vegas. And she's like, oh, well, you can't believe anything Kegan says, because, you know, he just makes this.
What was the fantasy world?
Yeah. And so, again, when you're looking at a serial predator, they spend 90 to 95% of their waking hours in the fantasy world, in their sexual fantasies, in their fantasies of murder. Now, we're going to talk about social media. You know, he uses methods and means. Kegan, whatever you want to call him, uses methods and means. He's already perfected this to where he's had hundreds of images, many girls that sent him nude photos and nude videos, doing specific things. And so this isn't something that he just started one day and then decided this was going to happen. This is something that took a long time of development. We don't know what devices police haven't found and what
stuff he erased.
What stuff he erased, or, you know, what they weren't able to locate. Mm-hmm. But I can guarantee this probably started for him at, you know, 16, 17, 18 years old. into adulthood.
Yeah, it's not something that just started.
It doesn't just stop either. A lot of
Right.
people, Belinda posted a video the other day of a judge who gave this man 15 years to serve consecutively when he had raped over 50 girls or molested over 50 children, which sickened me. I think the judge needs to step down from the bench. Anyway, this behavior doesn't change. So
Yeah, they don't get rehabilitated, just because they go to jail for a couple years. They come out doing the same thing the majority of the time.
Exactly. And even if they take a pill, all to make them impotent, one slip of that pill and their mind
Right.
goes right back to where it was. Even in the
Tina,
80s.
I want to say from the start of working on the Delphi girls, you had this predator pretty well pegged. You had all of his traits and all of everything that he was capable of, basically everything that he was capable of. You pretty much had him pegged. You had him profiled really well.
Thank you.
And I mean, we have went over how many with this case? Has there been 6 different person of interest that we had?
I think 9 different POIs that we had.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying in itself that they could all fit the profile.
Yeah, and all in that area.
That's scary.
But every time new stuff comes out, of course stuff changes.
Right.
And your mind kind of shifts and you're like, wow,
Well, and that's why I kind of want to explain to the viewers about how and what a profile for this type of serial sexual predator / possible killer is.
Right.
Because if they don't know, well, then of course they're going to look at you and say, oh, they're crazy, if they don't know the statistics behind it. And you and I have both studied, predatory behavior, criminal behavior, criminology, serial killers, the list goes on, psychology, etc. So, in studying all these things, nursing, mental health, medical health, in studying all these things, there's pretty much a standard for these types of crimes. But it's not just the standard, we've talked about the whole psychic thing before. I mean, a lot of people don't subscribe to that, and that's okay. You don't have to. It's no different than a cop getting hunches about things. When you know.
Right.
As far as this particular set of cases, we've seen it before. But as far as Abby and Libby go, this type of criminal was, in my opinion, a organized, experienced serial killer. Okay, this guy didn't wake up and just decide one day he's going to go out to the bridge and take 2 girls and kill them. No,
he had a plan. It was planned.
Right.
It might not have been for that day, but it was planned.
Yes.
Pre-organized.
And
in his mind anyway.
Right. And this is where his fantasy then becomes his reality. And so when you're looking at the fantasies of serial killers, they have different fantasies. I'll give you some examples. Okay, Ted Bundy, a lot of his waking hours he spent trolling, looking for victims, to where it got to where he could not function he couldn't keep a job. He couldn't function in a college. He couldn't finish school because his mind was consumed with looking for his victims. It is an addiction. It is not just a sexual addiction, but control, power, inflicting pain, all of these things. It makes them feel almost like they're gods, like they have complete and total control over someone, and that's part of the fantasy. Now each killer has their own signatures, of course.
Mhm.
Ted Bundy, he used to, he would say, well, I'd see girls walking down the street and I'd see a pretty girl and I'd think, oh, I'd love to date her. But then I'd think, wow, how wonderful her head would look on a spike. That's the sickness. Dennis Rader, BTK, you know, another example that people are familiar with. He would dress himself up in all this sadomasochist stuff, you know, ropes, ties, chains, you know, bondage, all this stuff. But one of the ways that he got caught and they were able to link his victims together was by the signature that he would tie a rope around their knees, around their legs, about 6 inches to 8 inches above the knee. The rope served no purpose. The only purpose for that rope wasn't going to keep their legs closed. It wasn't going to keep them in a specific position. The only purpose for that rope was some sort of fantasy need that he had in his mind.
Yeah, I watched his trial,
Yeah.
and it was terrifying to watch him and how matter of fact he was
Yes.
on the things that he talked about. It was just,
Yes. And we're going to discuss that about Kegan. Another example of this type of behavior, Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay. So Jeffrey Dahmer didn't start out with eating his victims. That came way later. Ted Bundy didn't start out having sex with his deceased victims. Neither did Dennis Rader, or, you know, a lot of these guys, they end up with necrophilia. They don't start out taking two at once. It always starts out with generally a singular victim, unless it's like, you know, the Vegas shooter that where they're just going to, you know, gun spray everybody, or the DC snipers, you know, where they're going to shoot.
yeah, that's totally different.
Those are totally different
Yeah.
types of murders than
Right.
serial sexual killers. Now, when you get into serial killers where it's sexual in nature, there's varying types, and I'm not going to go into all that. But, you know, it can get pretty graphic and disgusting. We're graphic enough here. But in looking at Kegan's behaviors, in the transcripts, it talks about how he looked up, was it Sandy Hook?
Mhm.
Wanted to see the bodies of the Sandy Hook victims. He also wanted to see,
Because it was the young children.
yes, and he also wanted to see John
JonBenet
Ramsey's, her abdomen, her deceased abdomen. So there's a couple of things I want to say about that. Serial killers don't start out with necrophilia. They don't start out with wanting to have sexual relations with a deceased body. Okay, so this is Kegan. This is Kegan's fantasy. You know, he's wanting to look at these dead children, which is extremely alarming. Not only that, when he's in particular speaking about JonBenet Ramsey and about wanting to see her abdomen, that would focus more in on a signature of his. You know, that is a specific paraphilia.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's looking at specific body parts and objectifying specific body parts. Does that go back to his own abdomen in his mental fantasy? You know, is there some sort of disconnect there? That would be for a psychiatrist.
Right.
You know, because he is a big guy. And these little girls, you know, I'm going to set that aside for now. But anyway, so in looking at Kegan in particular, you know, he's not been convicted of being a serial killer. He's not been even charged with these murders. But in looking at his behavior, so you've got him stalking girls, you've got him grooming girls, you've got a grooming process that he's perfected. at this point that probably started when he was 15, 16, 17, 18. And then he's at this point, he's probably viewed, snuff films, rough porn. His own father took him to Chicken Ranch.
Yeah, it all goes with the dark web too.
Yeah.
Only God knows what he's viewed,
shared, done.
Yeah, been involved with.
But I can pretty much guarantee you that if he is responsible for Delphi, this was not his first time. Whoever killed those two girls, it was not his first time. Checking the boxes, Kegan had 5 different phones. Now they're saying that these different phones were active at the same time in the same location. He could have had them sitting on his desk in front of him. He could have had them sitting on his bed in front of him, playing different fantasy roles with each person that he talked to, because that's the way a serial killer's mind works. Where, what was her name? Was it Naslund who worked with Bundy? She said he's like a Rubik's Cube. It was either Bundy or Dennis Rader. I can't remember. She wrote a book. I think it was Ted Bundy. But anyway, she wrote a book and she said he's like a Rubik's Cube and the cube has sides. It may have been Dennis Rader. Anyway, either way.
I believe it was Bundy.
I think it was Bundy, yeah. Anyway, she said that he would react to whatever side he was on in that day. In other words, he would compartmentalize every single thing in his life. And for example, she asked him, well, what do you think about these people who talk bad about you? Well, nobody's ever talked bad about me. There were people at his trial, it was one of them. I can't remember which one it was, and that's going to bug me now. But anyway, there were people at trial just saying all these horrible things about him the day before. And his response was, well, that wasn't today. So he had set that little box over here.
Mm-hmm.
That is another thing that Kegan Kline does. If you notice in his interviews, you're going back and forth. He compartmentalizes. He wants to see.
Yeah, when they was talking about the cars, talking about him sending things, and he said, but that wasn't me. Oh, that was Anthony Schatz. And he got excited. I mean, you could tell just by the wording, it was like a total different
another trait
person, because it was a different person. So he was Anthony Schatz at that moment.
Okay, and then looking at Kegan in what you specifically just brought up, aside from him compartmentalizing things and objectifying girls, young girls, he doesn't view them as people. He views them as objects for his own self-satisfaction and sexual gratification. It's not a give and take relationship. This is what he wants, and he's going to do 25 different things, whatever works, to get what he wants. And it's very narcissistic in nature. Also interesting is, well, why did Barbara McDonald asked him, well, why did you do this? He says, well, I was lonely. In reality, these serial killers, they believe they are alone in the world. And there's a reason for that. They can't share their fantasy life with everybody. They can't share their fantasy life with anybody.
Right.
Because if they do, they're caught. They know it's wrong, but they do everything they can to make their fantasy become the reality. And so what was Kegan doing? He's texting these girls, setting up Snapchat, Instagram, things that are easily erased that he thinks are gone forever. And, this is his secret life. There's the public life, the family life, and then the secret life. And so in his secret life, he's setting up and grooming these children. And he's having them send photos of him, and he's sending them fake photos because he knows that if he sent photos of himself, they're not
It's over.
it's over.
Yeah.
You know, he's using bait. That's a perfected art. It's not something you learn to do just like that. That is a perfected thing to do. And in talking with people, the police were saying in the transcripts, well, you know, on this phone, it's one person, but on this phone, it seems like an entirely different personality. Well, yeah, because they become chameleons.
Yeah, he was portraying that person.
Yes. He's not portraying who he really is, because
Right.
who he really is a secret. He's portraying who he wants them to think he is. So he's acting. In every scenario, he's acting. And what does a chameleon do? What does a predator do? They change their hunting tactics. So we see him as a serial predator changing his hunting tactics. We see him stalking. You know, the one girl, she talked to him supposed to meet up with him, and then oh poof, there's somebody outside her window with a ski mask on. Now, was he proven guilty in a court of law? No. But if you listen to the transcripts very carefully, one thing he does is he puts himself in a scenario as the killer. Only killers do that. Normal people, when they're being interviewed, do not put themselves in a scenario as the killer. If someone asked me, Tina, did you kill him? I'd say, oh, fuck no. Are you crazy? Give me a polygraph. Do whatever you got to do. Hell no. He doesn't do that. He puts himself in that scenario. Is there anything else that you want to add, Belinda, in discussing all of this? I mean, I think it's really important for the viewers to understand where we're coming from with Kegan. And the reason why I say he's bridge guy. We've got the pictures. And I've asked Belinda, I said, well, can you do an overlay of bridge guy with Kegan? I don't have the app to do it. Maybe someone out there can do it. I'm sure it'll be done eventually. But
Well, with the videos that they got out there, I heard them, they said that they're like overlapped like 3 times already. So
yeah,
it's kind of hard to do it.
I mean, we do have on the computer, we do have a bunch of we broke it down. We'll just put it that way. We broke the video down, we broke the images down. And yeah, I'll get the app and I'll do one eventually. But at this point in time, I don't think we're ready to share that, not until he's charged. I don't want to get in trouble for that. You know, we were talking about getting back to the traits of a serial predator. Up to this point, you know, a lot of people are saying that's not Kegan. You know, his sister doesn't think it's him. His brother said it sounds like Kegan, not like Tony. Statistically, the odds of him being a serial child killer and sharing his first victim with someone else, or a victim with someone else, is almost unheard of. Now, it has been done. Toolbox killer, you know, other killers that brought people in, but it is extremely rare. And I'm saying like the odds are like 97% that someone else did this with him against it, you know, not, you know, And they said, well, the police were pressuring him. Everybody's questioning Tony Kline because of the way Kegan was raised and the way his siblings talked about him and what life was like for Kegan as a child. Saying that Tony Kline was a very brutal man, sexually assaultive man, physically assaultive man, a bully, a thug, all these things. And what I say to that is, I'm not shocked by it.
Well, law enforcement knows with the images, with the videos, with all of that, it came from that household. It came from within whoever was there with Kegan Kline. So saying that, they're trying, that's why I think all of the questions came surrounding, you know, friend one, friend two, dad, is because they're trying to figure out exactly who was behind.
The thing that's alarming about Tony Kline to me is that the text from the 12 to 13-year-old that said that she had sex with Kegan and his father at the same time. That is because pedophilia is learned behavior.
Right.
And I've asked myself this before, was Kegan being molested as a child? Was he molested? And if so, who was doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And where did he learn this behavior? Because it is cyclic in nature. Pedophilia is cyclic in nature and it is learned.
Well, in the transcript, it also said that the stepsister, that they both had sex with her at the same time. So
that was the 12 or 13-year-old girl. And then there was a girlfriend that also had sex with and his dad.
So this is something that they did.
Another one, he asked another girl, Kegan did in particular, if she would let his friends gangbang her. And so that account that was set up was actually being used as a payout as well. They were putting money into it, but it was
that was the money, right?
So you know they're being
they said there was an Anthony Schatz money account,
right. And didn't they say that one of the girls got some money out of that account, that basically he was being sugar daddy in order for her to bang him and his dad? Hate to put it so crudely. Do we need to take a break for a minute, Belinda?
No, I'll be done in 1 second.
That said, the odds are 95% against, I'd say 97% against.
Sorry about that.
Another person being out there with him, unless he was going to sell it, put it in a Dropbox, or was specifically doing this for someone who had approached him.
Yeah.
Is he?
One videotape and the other doing the.
Right. But generally speaking, serial killers, they're very secretive. Their life is a secret. Even if you go back and watch again Ted Bundy, when he's talking to you about his crimes, he doesn't want to say it out loud because it is a secret. And so he'll start whispering. He'll whisper names. He can't say the names out loud because that's part of a predator taking ownership.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You know how Ted Bundy whispered when he talked about his crimes, when he would mention their names, you know, he would whisper. You know, in Dennis Rader, you watch his tapes, you know, he would put his head down and matter of factly speak, but he would put his head down. It's almost like they have to hide. Gary Ridgway, you know, held out on, you know, they already had him for I don't know how many murders, and he still held out. Same thing with Samuel Little, the most prolific U.S. serial killer in history. You know, he held out on victims, wouldn't tell them their names, wouldn't identify victims that he'd sketched out. You know, but he knew every little detail because they take ownership over that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, what did Kegan do? Well, he erased his phones, not just because he didn't want to get caught. It's not all about not wanting to get caught. It's about him keeping those fantasies as ownership and control over those people. Something else that came out in the transcripts that's very interesting. So the police initially said that the murders of Abby and Libby were non-secular. Lo and behold, he became an ordained minister, or if you will, a justice of the peace. I don't know what else you want to call it, but he became ordained. So, what about those signatures were non-secular? What do you think? What do you think, Belinda?
I don't know. I think it all fits.
Yeah. Now,
sometimes you just got to cut to the chase and, come on. I mean, Kegan Kline's an animal. I'm sorry.
And he was made that way.
Right.
He wasn't born that way. He was created.
Right.
You got.
I say that from the transcripts and things that he had said.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine myself saying the things that he said to these girls to my husband, much less to someone that I didn't know. And the graphic stuff that he said sexually, I mean, just what he wanted to do to him, and it just twisted ain't the word for it.
Right.
I mean, you look at him and you think, he's looks like he's kind of harmless. He was just on there. He was just typing to him. No, the things that he said to him and groomed them, it was horrific. I couldn't imagine looking at a text and reading the things that he said to them, girls, to all of the girls that he was messaging. I couldn't imagine.
No. Mm-mm.
I would feel violated, and it's over a phone or over a text message.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine it.
Right. But that's just, see, a lot of, you can look at this. He may have had someone else out there with him, and there's various reasons for that. Let's go over some of those reasons. Okay, so a young man was spotted on the side of the road on the backside of the trails in his vehicle. And a woman saw him, and he said he was waiting for his dad. Waiting to do what? He asked him if he was okay, got freaked out, and she left. Why did she get freaked out? Who's to say? Said he was acting strangely, and she left. So, did he do this and set this up and film this with Tony Kline?
Well, let's not forget, Tony Kline's off work on Mondays. And this crime happened
on Mondays.
Not saying that he did or didn't.
Yeah.
He had opportunity.
Right. And then here's the thought too, again, we heard about his abusive childhood. Now, he in particular wasn't abused, but he witnessed his older half-brother and sister being abused. And then him and his father, according to the stepdaughter, participated in sexual assault against her, both of them, because let's face it, she's 12, 13 years old, she's a kid. And they're both having sex with his stepdaughter, with Tony Kline's stepdaughter, according to her. So, he was shown by his father what to emulate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. Now they said Kegan could get away with anything without consequences or repercussions. So, what would stop him? What would ever stop him? What would ever make him know the difference between right and wrong? What would make him, go off this path into the fantasy land? Here's an interesting concept that I thought about. Okay, so you got Elizabeth and Lyric, and you've got Abby and Libby. And at the sites, you've got the 3 logs that are coming up, placed in the ground. They're led across the creek, He's ordained. Was this sort of like a baptism type, religious type fantasy, and then he's gonna sacrifice the virgins? Or, what exactly was occurring there? If it was both. And I find it really interesting that he used to go back and forth from Colorado to Indiana, Colorado, back and forth, Denver to Indiana, Denver to Delphi. Which is something we discussed early on with Mark Redwine. So, yeah. There's also another scenario that, he had mentioned, the police had mentioned him, in one of his texts, asking this girl if she would have sex with him and his friends, this gang, if they could gangbang her. So, was it him and his friends? Was it him and his pops? There are some reasonable questions there. When I listened to the transcripts, what I got out of it is Kegan says, no, this person, friend 1 wasn't involved. Friend 2, friend 1 had his phone and it could have been him. But then, well, no, it couldn't have been him because he was in Las Vegas and you were in Delphi. Well, what about friend 2? It could have been friend 2. And well, no, I didn't really hang around with him because, I didn't want to be seen with him because he was selling like a pound a week or whatever. He says, I'm not going to snitch my friend out. In the same breath, he's snitching on him. And then finally he admits, well, his dad was violent. It could have been his dad, He's pointing a finger at everybody but himself. And at every single turn, even after he puts himself in the scenario as the killer. It's very possible that he had someone else's DNA on him that they're not aware of when he went out there, that he picked up somebody's DNA. And that they don't know who that person is. When he went to drop off his phone, did he go somewhere else first? What do you think about him saying he didn't want his dad to know, but he was going to take off in the middle of the night? And then he said he didn't. And then he said he was fucked. What do you think he meant by that? Why would he take off and run from his dad?
Other than thinking that his dad would beat the crap out of him if he told on him, but I don't think it had anything. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because he'd already been questioned. He'd already been questioned at that point, and then he wanted to run. Why is he going to run? I don't know. That's the only thing I came up with.
Well, what happens when somebody commits murder? What do they usually do? In the first 2 days, boom, they're gone. They book it because they're afraid of getting caught.
Sorry.
Right? They take off.
Take off, change their appearance. Yeah, that's usually the first things they start doing.
Yeah.
They want to run.
And I
Get
mean,
the hell out of there.
He's gained what, like 75 pounds since then? 50 to 75 pounds, changed his hair. He doesn't wear his hair the same. Now it's all, balding here and pulled down like this.
Right. Oh, it looks completely different. He looks like he's aged 20 years in 5 years. And he's still a young kid. There's no reason he should look that old, that rough.
Well, I mean, he's 27 when you know, he's 27, 28 now, almost 28 now. 10 years ago, he would have been 18. If he's responsible for Elizabeth and Lyric. And thinking about that whole religious fantasy thing. And see, that's the thing with serial killers, you know, once they do something, it's almost like a crack for them. They want or heroin. It's, you know, this addiction is almost like that in the mind of a serial killer where they have to get that same high. So, you know, Elizabeth and Lyric were a lot younger. They were 8 and 10. And so an 8 and 10-year-old, it's very, very easy to control them if you're driving a van or if, you know, you're with somebody or whatever. So if you put the non-secular aspect into it, it's a religious aspect of it, you know, and he's got these girls, what's his next high going to be? What was his first high? What's his next high?
Mm-hmm.
And what's his next high after that? Interesting enough, you know, in August 2020, he's talking about necrophilia. He didn't just wake up as a 15-year-old and say, oh, I want to, you know what I mean?
Well, and when with law enforcement and them, if they're questioning him, it was like pulling teeth to try and get information out from a 12-year-old and down. He didn't want to talk about that. He didn't want to mention, oh no, you know, not that young, but oh, it was that young.
It was a young and always an outcast. He said he was an outcast in school.
Mm-hmm.
He was separate. He was weird. He was the isolated kid.
For some reason, he doesn't want to.
Which all fits in and is typical of the life of a serial killer. You know, they're the outcast. They're the weird one. They're the different one. They have, a lot of people say, oh, well, they have low IQs. They have high IQs. No, it varies. There's a range there, okay? But it's generally, they're the weird one. They're the one that doesn't fit in. Everybody knows there's something not quite right. There's also the history of abuse. You know, witnessing abuse, witnessing brutality, witnessing animal, you know. I wonder, did Kegan hunt? You know, was he a hunter?
They said Tony did. Tony was a hunter, so.
But he
probably took him with.
Wow. Now, here's the thing. If Tony was involved in this, you know, maybe Kegan did it and his car wouldn't start, couldn't get the hell out of there, doesn't have a license, so, you know, he's screwed. What's he gonna do? Call Pop. Dad's never punished him for anything in his life, according to his siblings. Those are his half siblings, you know, blood.
Right.
You know, he could get away with anything, and Dad would have protected Kegan because Kegan was his favorite. So if he's out there, his car breaks down, what's it going to do? It's going to call up Pop. Pop, come get me. You're a car guy. Fix this. Get me the fuck out of here. Now, if you're looking at the other scenario where he recorded, I tend to think they said, the police said in their statements that the person on the bridge was the killer. So they have to know from whatever video, guy coming across that bridge is the killer, from whatever they have that they didn't share with the public. The other thing is too, you know, if he's facing a capital charge, which he very well could, you know, it's a high profile case. It's premeditated. It's depraved indifference. It's all these horrible, heinous things. He could be facing a capital charge. If his dad was involved, he's not going to turn on his dad. And the police keep saying they're missing that one piece. They're wanting Dad to identify his son. Why? So he can get a needle in his arm? He's not going to turn on his son and get him the death penalty.
Yeah, we almost seen that with Casey Anthony.
Yeah.
You know, same scenario as you're talking about.
Yeah.
The parents weren't. They weren't going. They gave enough information to keep her out of jail, to get her out of jail.
And I mean, she even accused her own father of molesting her.
Yeah.
We knew
Yeah.
that was bullshit.
Yeah.
Come on. We knew that was crap.
Mm-hmm. But that went to her defense.
Well, the reason they couldn't convict Casey Anthony of killing Kaylee, frankly, is because they couldn't prove manner of death. If you
Well,
can't,
and I think, yeah, and I think they tried so hard, and they just wanted to put that, you know, life in prison.
yeah,
You're not really going to get that. I mean, without matter of death.
if you
I mean,
cannot
it's
prove
going to be
manner of
hard.
death, you can't prove that the child was murdered. It could have been
Yeah,
accidental.
they should have put more.
That's
Gave
reasonable
them more to
doubt.
work with. Yeah, they should have gave them more to work with. Because she would have got a higher charge. I mean, she would have got charged.
And I say that because Kaylee was her daughter. Now, if it's a stranger that's abducted,
Yeah,
and
it's,
taken 20 miles from their house and they're found deceased, you know it's murder.
right. Yeah, it's totally different.
Totally
I
different.
was just saying with the parents, you know,
Yeah,
parents aren't going to go and throw the other ones under the bus.
right. And Tony Kline's not going to throw his kid under the bus so they can put a needle in his arm. No. Mm-mm. Indiana has the death house. They have the death penalty. Even if it was a state charge. You know, and then I look at Chadwell and I look at the tattoos, and you know, they look damn close to Elizabeth and Lyric and Abby and Libby. Two
I
heads.
mean, it's kind of hard not to think about the connections. It's hard not to.
Help it. And of course, you know, the federal government's going to come in because they already know. I mean, he downloaded this crap to a Dropbox and those images got shared. Now, Belinda was talking about, you were talking about this before. He said, God, we want to be wrong. You know, please don't let that happen. Why would you do that to the family? Why would you humiliate these children in that way? But in the mind of a serial killer, those kids are an object. They're not a person with a family or feelings.
Yeah, they don't have the conscience, and
No.
or they couldn't do that. I mean,
And
you know.
if you look at Kegan in his eyes and look at his face,
Oh,
it's blank.
yeah, they actually changed. His eyes changed.
Yeah, there is no, if you look at a younger picture of him when he was a teenager, he still had that light in his eyes a little bit. Now it's just dark and kind of like a blank haze that all killers,
They all have it.
serial killers, they all have that look.
We talk about that. It just looks like they lost the light, like no sparkle whatsoever. No
light in their eyes. It's just dead.
And it's crazy, even the eye color changed, like how it happens.
The look of their face changes.
Yeah.
The look of their eyes, especially. You know, and a detective who worked on Bundy's case, he said he never saw, you know, Ted Bundy was so charming. He was such a chameleon and he had his act down pat until they went to take his bite impressions. And Ted just lost it, flipped out. I want my attorney, started screaming, going crazy. He said that's when he saw the real Ted. Now, about a month or two ago, we were talking about, I bet, you know, that he was stalking Abby and Libby, or Libby in particular, before they were ever murdered. That's not something that's, you know, everything looking at Kegan lines up to be the profile of a serial killer. He hasn't been charged with anything like that. And you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. These are my opinions. But yeah. Is there anything you want to add? Anything on I haven't touched on. You know, and then you got the borderline personality factor, narcissistic personality factor that plays into that, because, the moms who were abused by Tony are now out of the picture. So it's, you got this lonely, isolated kid, abandonment, abuse. What the fuck did they think he was going to turn out to be?
Right.
That's a man who was created by his environment. It doesn't mean what he did was right by any stretch of the word. He didn't have a chance in that house. He didn't have a chance.
And if he's not bridge guy,
Yeah,
he sure could be. He was heading in that direction.
was he out there? We talked about this before. He's got this person, JP, who lived right there. And then you've got Chadwell with the tattoos, who lived right there. And these guys all tend to run in the same circles. Did they set it up to make a snuff film?
Well, and JP said that his dad dated a woman that lived right next door.
And knew him very well.
And yeah.
He said himself, he knew him very well.
Yeah, there's all kinds of connections there. It's like,
does that mean he's involved? No, but I find it awfully suspicious that he puts this picture for all of social media to see, that's got the knife, that's got his IDs, that's got the ski mask, that's got all this religious and Arabic crap, that's got his schizophrenic, the jacket, the clothing, I mean, everything. It's like, dude. And then you were out there the day before, was this an outlaw thing? Was it in that group, that particular group? Chadwell had the dog outlaw, and the other one had the dog, and the other one had this, and the other one had that. Come on. Were they all dipping into the same Dropbox? There's a lot more questions now that the transcripts have come out, but it's clear, in my opinion, it's clear that Kegan Kline.
Well, it is. It is. It's a lot clearer, but yet there is more questions.
Yeah, he was there, in my opinion. And he fits every single box, statistically, of what a serial killer is and how their life progresses. I'm sure there's going to be more coming out in the future. And they keep pushing his trial out, in my opinion, when they were questioning him about who was at that house and who was on the other phone. What's he going to say? It was my dad? Not going to say that. He's not going to put a needle in his dad's arm. And his dad's not going to put a needle in his arm. So they're probably trying to negotiate or trying to get him to slip up and admit something. They stopped accusing him of having involvement, because every time, if you noticed in the transcripts, every time they started mentioning Delphi, he started getting like freaked out.
Yes, he wanted an attorney. He didn't want to talk.
Nope, I want my attorney.
Yeah, they don't want to mess up the case.
Of course not. They wanted him to keep talking so they could,
Yeah, the more he talks, the more he might slip up. Give him a little to go on.
But I mean, whereas Chadwell strikes me as someone definitely capable of it.
Yeah, to go from complete calmness, guys down the hill, to murder.
There's no soul there.
Yeah, there's none.
There's blank. A complete objectification in fantasy becoming reality for that individual. And that's what a serial killer does.
Mhm.
So, is there anything else we were going to talk about?
And you look at the guy, looks like just the average Joe, looks like just the average person walking across there. He does look a little old to be walking across the bridge, but that's just because of the filter that was on it, or the overlay. But the average person, the average voice, he didn't have the anger. You would think that he would have been raged,
Nope.
but
Total
no.
control. And as to a person, it's total fantasy, in that fantasy mode.
And most of the time in
Premeditated.
murder cases, you don't have that. You don't have the video and you don't have the audio.
Right.
And in this case, you do, and then you get to actually see, like, look how calm he was.
I wonder if they'd done a search warrant on Kegan for scars, defensive wounds, marks. And I'd wondered if, when they searched his home, if they actually inspected his person.
No, I don't know. The only thing that I did see that they came back 2 weeks later and took the dog.
Oh.
But I don't know whatever happened with
Was
that.
it dog DNA out there? Was it dog DNA?
Or dog hair. Had to be some. They had to have something.
Dog. They took Kline's dog.
Right.
Was it dog DNA?
Yeah, there had to be something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chadwell, let the dog attack the little girl. Did that happen with Abby and Libby? We don't know. Was Chadwell responsible for, and then like you suggested, a copycat or?
Well, it would definitely give a little more control, but then there would have almost had to have been two, or he would have had to have came earlier and put the dog tied up and then went back, or there was two.
Well, and they initially said that they thought it was somebody camping down there, staying down there, which would have
Yeah, drifter.
Did they have the dog tied up down at a campsite? Perhaps they found a campsite with dog food, cans, whatever, a dog bowl, who knows?
Yeah, we don't know what law enforcement has.
No, we don't know. We don't have the scene, so we don't know. But
speculating.
Yeah. There's a lot more questions now than there are answers. But the likelihood of him being down there with someone else,
slimmer.
Serial killers, about 97% that no, it was just him. And the police said from the very beginning, they were trying to get Kegan to say that it was somebody else, and he wouldn't even do that. He wouldn't say it was his dad. He wouldn't say it was his friend. And well, it's possible. It's possible. Well, of course, then he's going to start thinking, well, I got to point the finger at somebody because now I'm pointing the finger at myself. Duh. He's not very smart.
Well, and everything as they questioned him, he denied everything. Yeah. And they would say, no, you told us.
Yes.
Matter of fact.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you told us.
And then he'd say, oh, yeah.
And then he would say, right.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I mean, so much into his fantasies that he doesn't even, what's he going to do at this point? They're either going to charge him or they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they keep pushing it out? I don't think it was another person out there with him. I think his car may have broken down and his dad may have come to bail his son out. Not that he, according to what's been told to the public, isn't capable of that.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't put it past him, but it's more likely that it's just him.
Unless they started out
unless-
together.
Yeah,
Unless they started out together.
yes,
If they started out together, he would be comfortable with it.
yeah. Yeah. So, you know, there is that slim chance that it was someone else or a gang related thing, group of individuals, but
Right.
it's highly unlikely. I mean, right now, you know, they have a pretty strong circumstantial case against him. And, you know, Superintendent Carter, he keeps saying, well, we're just one piece away. Well, they know who the killer is.
Yeah.
One piece away is somebody who can put him there. Because if they can't put him there and his phone's over on Country Club Lane, what do they have? They've got text messages. They've got circumstantial evidence. We don't know what they have at the crime scene.
Right.
And that's very disheartening, you know, because this was very well organized and thought out. It's, even though it was premeditated and organized, it was still happenstance. They didn't know if those girls were going to show or not. And that leaves reasonable doubt. Not that he was involved, because clearly he was involved,
Right.
in my opinion. Clearly he was involved, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I think law enforcement made that perfectly clear.
Oh, yeah.
They know he was involved.
You'd have to be like, have an IQ of 2 to not know that, you know, it's him. And that's why they said, they told the police, well, you're safe, you know, you can go out, you can feel safe, because they had him hemmed up. They had him lock, stock, and barrel from the first week.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you they had tracking devices on all his
Oh, they were monitoring him.
Oh, everything he did.
Mm-hmm.
They were watching that man everywhere he went, who he was with, who he interacted with, what were his hobbies, what was he doing. They kept his phones on and didn't seize the phones initially so they could find out which drop boxes he was using and, you know, which child porn sites he was surfing and clubs he was involved in, and learning all they could about his behaviors.
Well, and they had to wait until they also had to wait until they got the search warrants to be able to get the information from, Instagram and Snapchat, and
go back to each company individually. And, you know, they said he was the one Black Star and Kick, and there was another Chomo site. And of course, once they find those sites, how many arrests did they get off of those sites?
Mhm.
You know, it is a vast investigation. And I'm sure I can say with confidence, there's going to be charges coming.
Yeah, it's moving in the right
More
direction.
charges. There's going to be more charges coming. The question is when and what else do they have? There is that slight chance that he was working in conjunction or for someone else. How did he get in and out of there?
Or someone hacked the hacker.
He says, well, I don't have a driver's license. Hell, my nephew didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a driver's license when I was 14. I was out driving. Come on. When you live in a country, you learn how to drive young. That's a fact.
I don't know. I learned to drive young and I was in the city, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying him as far I was in the
Well,
circle.
I was gonna say first time I ever drove 13. I think
Yeah.
well, I was probably younger than
14.
that because I drove out in the country, but driving in the city, I was like 13.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty common. There's people that drive all over every day that don't have a driver's license. People that have had 10 DUIs that still get in a car and drive drunk.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a driver's license. I don't drive. Right, dude. I mean, you lie every 2 minutes, every 1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of deception in that
The other thing he did too,
interview.
which I noted in his interviews, was a group of individuals that do the lie detecting on YouTube. What's the name of them? There's 4 of them.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know which
I've
ones I'm
watched.
talking about? I can't think of their name of the group, but anyway, they're body language experts and lie, in lie detection and all of that stuff. I would like to see what they had to say about Kegan Kline, and because one of the things he does frequently is he'll say, like, for example, I didn't do it. Really, I didn't. Or he'll follow up every single statement with a single phrase to reiterate that that's what his intention is, and that's usually indicative of a lie. I mean, once or
Right.
twice, yeah, but he does it all the time.
Yeah.
Dude.
Right. Right. That's what he said. He kept saying right.
Mhm,
Yeah, right.
mhm. Oh, here's another example. Well, if I would have done this, really, if you would have done this, why would you even put yourself in that scenario? Normal people don't do that. And the other thing too, I noticed in his interview with Barbara McDonald, whenever he's telling a lie, his blink rate goes boom, 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 boom. I was like, oh, there's Prince Andrew. Boom, 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 boom. It's a shame we couldn't see his whole body because, you'd see him doing the swallowing, the licking of the lips, the tapping of the foot, crossing his arms.
Like he said, well, they said I failed the lie detective test. Lie detector, yeah, he failed.
He says, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's because they said I was the last person to talk to Libby. You don't know? That fact wouldn't stick in your freaking head.
Well, and saying that he didn't even know. He didn't even know her. I never talked to her. After he had already told him that he did. He confirmed it. And then he said, I didn't know. And then they said, yes, you talked to her at the sleepover. Right.
Yeah. You had contact. You were talking to her for months prior to the sleepover, but you didn't know her?
Right. I'm acting like him, right?
Right. All right. Is there anything else we're missing?
No, I just wish it would hurry up and
Yeah.
give this family some kind of
Peace of mind. I mean, bring charges against him already. Come on. We know he's involved. We know he did it.
yeah. They're building the case.
I know. It's hard not to say hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Yeah. And we don't want a sloppy investigation, they gotta do whatever it takes to actually put the case together.
Yeah.
Well, they got one shot at it.
So I'm curious though if they did check him because they said Libby fought like hell. And I can imagine that that's why they knew it was him involved and why they went after him, because he had to have bruising, wounds, something. She was a big girl. She wasn't a little tiny little thing. She was a big girl. And she was athletic and into sports, softball.
Mhm.
Yeah, she probably waylaid his ass a few times. That's probably why, not just from the Snapchat and Instagram, but probably why they focused in on him in the first week. Does he have any marks on him? Does he have any defensive wounds?
I guess just time to tell.
And Superintendent Doug Carter says, I can't wait for the day that we can tell you everything. I can't imagine how difficult it is for all of those involved in investigating this to shut up and keep silent.
Well, you know how it is with us. We have to sit here and bite
Yep.
our tongue.
Bite your tongue.
Bite
not
your tongue
saying-
because you don't want to say certain things, and
How
try
many
to speak
times-
as open as you can, but you can only say so much. I mean,
How many times have I said, yeah, I can't say
me too.
Oh, I can't say that. Yeah, I digress.
Yeah. So I can just imagine how hard it is for Doug Carter to get on there because they want to know, is he your guy?
They know it's him, in my opinion. For legal purposes, I am stating it is in my opinion.
Yeah. Mine too. We believe it.
All persons discussed are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. In this opinion. Not meant to inflict harm intentionally on anyone or otherwise. So, yeah, I just wish I'd go ahead and charge you. I'm sure the public feels the same way.
Oh, they do. Everybody's watching this case as it unfolds, and it's really at slow pace.
Yeah. I wonder if it's going to be a capital charge, if that's what the big push is.
I think that's what they're going for, of course.
And they're going to cross all their T's, dot all their I's, and put in every comma.
I mean, it's a heinous crime.
Yeah. And, with the mitigating circumstances, I'm sure they're weighing that as well. Hence the interviews with the families, the mom, the brothers, the sister, stepsister, all of them. They're weighing in all the mitigating circumstances because honestly, if I was on a jury and someone with that background, even though I know he's a monster, I don't hold him completely responsible because he had extreme mitigating circumstances. Not like Jodi Arias, she was a cheerleader. She had everything she ever wanted as a kid, and she was still a murderer. And she thought she was smarter.
Well, because she was a beautiful young girl.
Yeah.
She just thought she could do that.
Wanted what she wanted, and she said she wasn't going to be satisfied. It wouldn't be able to live until Travis was dead.
That's one of them that she thought was the perfect crime.
Yeah, she thought it was going to be the perfect murder.
Mm-hmm.
Black Widow in the making.
Yeah.
Creepy spider. But unlike Kegan, she didn't have all these mitigating circumstances, even though she tried to create them. She didn't have them. He literally has an enormous amount of mitigating circumstances. I wonder, had he been placed up for adoption and put in another home growing up, would he have grown up to be a killer? Probably not. Just like Charles Manson, going through all the sexual abuse that he went through, and being put in Boys Town, and thrown out when he was a kid, and all the stuff that he went through. Would he have would he have actually grown up to be a murderer? He was very talented. He was a good singer. You know, he could have had a totally different life. People don't realize when they're raising their kids what kind of effect they have on them. You know, and abuse, it's also cyclic in nature. Physical, mental, emotional abuse is cyclic. Until somebody says, I'm going to stop this. I know it's wrong and I'm going to stop this. We ought to do another video about that. About child.
I mean, I go back to the Menendez brothers. I mean, that was another crime that was
Had everything, just like Jody.
Yeah.
Total entitlement, like what is it they say that kid had, the one out west, where he was spoiled rotten, given everything, and then he committed murder, and he was shocked that he was going to go to jail. Really, dude? What do they call that syndrome? Oh, I can't think of it. Yeah, Menendez brothers. Wow. I don't believe that children are born to kill. You know, there is a big nature versus nurture discussion.
I mean, I think, this is just my opinion, with the Menendez brothers, if they would have had a trial today versus 30 years ago,
Yeah.
I think it would have been a different outcome.
Maybe.
With all of the sexual, with all of the essay going on with them, and I think it would have been a little bit different. Not saying that they wouldn't have been charged and thrown in jail, but it would have been a little different.
Yeah. You know, everybody's always searching for the why.
Mm-hmm.
And with Kegan Kline, if he is convicted of these crimes, I think the why is pretty clear. There's not really a question there of what he was going to grow up to be.
Well, most of them, you look at the ones that is out in society and they're living a normal life.
Yeah.
And doing normal things every day.
Yeah.
And I believe he was more in front of a computer or in front of the phone, and that's what he did. He didn't have that lifestyle.
It was on the John Kelly profiler on YouTube. They were talking about that very thing. I attended one of their symposiums on serial murder, and the profilers. John Kelly, who's an FBI profiler. Ed Mirsky is the psychologist, and Frank Adamson, he was on the Green River Task Force for Gary Ridgway. But anyway, I attended one of the symposiums, and they were talking about how in the 70s and the 80s, it used to be these guys would go out, these serial killers would go out trolling for, sex workers and marginalized categories. Now all they got to do is get on the internet. And so now it's even tougher for law enforcement because that's what the serial predators do. They go on the internet, they surf up porn, they surf up dark web,
Mm-hmm.
You've got what was that guy in New York? Oh, he was a social media killer. What did they call him? He met the girls on a date, took them to a hotel room, strangled them. Craigslist Killer. You got the Craigslist Killer. You got all these guys that are getting on social media. They'll say, oh, I'm going to buy this house. I want to go meet this, real estate agent. And then he goes to the house and then boom, she's dead. It's a lot more prevalent on social media now. And so where it used to be, the consumption of fantasy was only like 60% of the time because of the World Wide Web. It's now 90 to 95% for every waking minute.
Well, yeah, and then the detective actually said that to him. You wake up in the morning. They could tell by his text.
Yeah.
That he woke up in the morning. It was an all-day adventure on the activity.
And that is the
all day
profile.
long.
That's part of the profile of a serial killer.
Yeah. Every waking moment, he was on social media.
Yeah. Yep. Who are the other victims?
Oh, there's many, I'm sure.
I mean, who are the other victims of the Delphi serial killer? You know, they tied it somewhat to Flora. How did they tie that in? The police tied it to Flora.
Mhm.
And you know,
Yeah, I don't know.
with all these other
No,
agents coming in, you know, and them saying that he had signatures, what other crimes were
that
tied?
was the Flora fire,
Yeah.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The 4 little girls died.
right.
Mom survived, but her daughters all died. The, you know, animal cruelty, fire. You know, I wonder if Kegan Kline was a bedwetter, because you got the McDonald triad, you know, animal
Mhm.
cruelty, bedwetting, and fire starting. Was he a fire starter?
Yeah, I was camping one year, and there was a gentleman there with us, and he was lighting the fire, and he was getting excited. Like you could see, he was always just, a mellow guy, and then all of a sudden he starts putting all the wood in the fire, and the fire starts sparking, and he got excited. And I said, I bet you were a real fire starter when you were little, weren't you? And he looked at me, and he was like, and he said, how did you know? And you could just tell. And he said that he had started all kinds of fires. He was a little arsonist when he was young.
Wow.
But you could see it. He got excited. I mean, it was a complete different demeanor. It was just like, wow.
Wow.
So it fed his, it was almost like a thing of going back into his childhood. I guess he got really excited.
Yeah. Generally, almost all serial killers have the triad. So I'm wondering if he was a bedwetter.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe someone can answer that question.
Not potty trained until he was older. 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Hubby's home. I think we need to end this for
Yeah. I
tonight.
hope we didn't.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight to everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the like and share button. Yeah, I hope this was informative for everybody watching. It's not tough to research, but we're just putting it out there. All right,
Just talking.
we're just talking. We're just having a discussion. All right, folks, you take care. Belinda, love you. Have a good night.
I love you too.
Good night, folks.
Pray for all the missing.
That's right.